Hi, I'm back again. So today we are talking about how to write a summary. In the IGCSE First Language English, be it the 0500 or the 0990, you would write a summary and it's always in paper one. And in the IGCSE, your summary is worth 15 marks. Now let's talk about that briefly. What is a summary? How should you write a summary? What is expected of you by the examiner in the IGCSE? Now, I tell my students most times, and I keep talking about my students because they're a wonderful set of learners. I tell my students that a summary is a trimmed down version of a text. And the imagery I always whip up when I talk about summary writing to my students is the imagery of the plant. Do you have a garden? If you have a garden, then you would understand this imagery. Most times, we wait for our gardens to overgrow. And when our gardens are overgrown, what do we do to the plants, the flowers? We trim them. Why do we prune? Why do we trim the flowers? Because the foliage is overgrown and we have to prune, we have to trim the flowers, the leaves into shape so that our gardens look beautiful, okay, and neat. Now that's the same idea in summary writing. When you write a summary, what you're doing is that you're sticking only to fact. You're sticking only to points which are relevant to the summary task. So my garden is overgrown. And then I step into the garden and begin to prune the plant. By pruning, I'm cutting off leaves which I consider excess. And that is what I expect you guys, okay, to transfer into your summary writing. What are the excess leaves? The excess leaves are the extra pieces of information, point at which information is repeated. Excess leaves also cover your opinions. You don't include your opinions in a summary. You don't make comment, personal comment in a summary. You also never state a point two or more times. You never do that. You also avoid extra pieces of information and you stick only to fact. So let's talk about that briefly. So I already said that a summary is a trimmed down version of a text. Now, what am I trimming off? What am I cutting off? I'm cutting off repetition. I'm cutting off extra pieces of information. I'm cutting off my opinions. I'm cutting off my comments. I'm also cutting off introductory paragraph and I'm cutting off concluding paragraph. You have to cut all of that off your response because if you do not do that, you wouldn't have a summary. Okay, so what are the do's of summary writing within the context of the IGCSE? The first thing, you must remember that the question tells you how much to write. In your booklet, you would see that you are to write the summary in no more than 120 words. Now, writing in 120 words suggests that the primary objective of your summary is for you to communicate relevant pieces of information, but in the shortest way possible. So I tell my students, brevity must be their watchword in the IGCSE summary writing task. So the first thing, you must keep to the word count, 120 words, no more, no less. Now, how do you keep to the word limit? The first thing I tell my student is, when you are ready to write the summary, read the question first. Reading the question helps you to get the focus of the task so you know exactly what you're doing. When you've read the question, then read the passage the first time. And the summary is oftentimes drawn from text B in the IGCSE First Language English. You read the passage the first time, that is skimming. You read through quickly. You rifle through quickly in order for you to get the gist of the text, to know what the text is all about. When you've done the first reading, then you read the question the second time. This time, you are paying specific attention to the focus of the task. So let me give an example. Let's say you are asked to write a summary about the advantages and the disadvantages of swimming at night. Now that tells you that the text is about swimming, and most likely swimming at night. Okay, so when you read the question the second time, what are you doing? You are trying to verify whether or not you understand the focus and the demands of the task. After reading the question the second time, you then turn to the passage, the text, which is text B oftentimes, and you read text B the second time. This time, you are reading text B with an intention to scan. And I tell my students all the time that they must ensure that they identify 12 points at the minimum. Why 12 points? I understand that it could be pretty difficult, okay, but it's one of the safest things you can do for yourself. Identify 12 points. Identify 12 points so you can still have some 10 correct points should 1 or 2 points be incorrect. Now, when you identify 10 points, how do you do the identification? I encourage my student to annotate the text. Annotating the text means underline the text. When you read text B, as you begin to come across points, sentences, phrases, pieces of information which you consider to be relevant to the question, underline them. When you have underlined 12 relevant points, then you are one way through, okay, to having all 15 marks. Now, what should you do next? I tell my students that summary writing within the context of the IGCSE is done in only 2 types of sentences. You use the complex sentence and the compound complex sentence. But because many students struggle with constructing compound complex sentences, so I encourage my students to stick to complex sentences. And what makes a complex sentence? A complex sentence comprises 2 types of clauses. One independent clause and a dependent clause. Now that means that one clause can stand on its own and make complete sense, while the other clause cannot stand on its own. It has to rely on the independent clause. Now, remember, I advised you to identify 12 relevant points. If you have 12 relevant points and you have to utilize complex sentences, then that suggests, okay, that you're likely to have 6 sentences, because a complex sentence comprises of 2 clauses. So technically, in one sentence, you're likely to have 2 points. So if I have identified 12 points and I want to utilize complex sentences, then it means I'm likely to have about 6 complex sentences in my response. Now that's that about the type of sentences and the number of points I'm advising and counseling you to identify. However, after that, what do? The first thing you do when you're ready to write your summary is you must begin with a topic sentence. Many students begin with an introductory paragraph. No, your summary does not require an introductory paragraph. In actual fact, In your summary, you should rather begin with a topic sentence. And what's a topic sentence? It's the first sentence of a paragraph that clearly expresses the focus of the paragraph. Rather than begin with an introductory paragraph, begin with a topic sentence. And the topic sentence must derive from the question. So, the question says you should summarize the advantages and disadvantages of swimming at night. My topic sentence is likely to be, there are numerous advantages as well as disadvantages of swimming at night. Now, that is a perfect example of a topic sentence. And what the topic sentence does is that it helps the examiner to realize that you are a competent student and that you understand the focus of the summary task. After the topic sentence, you must now begin to utilize complex sentences to express the point you intend to present. I tell my students that once they have identified 12 relevant points, the next thing to do is for them to link up the point. You don't have to express the point in the progression in which they appear in the passage. However, the way you express your point must be logical. So it's possible that point 1 does not flow with point number 2. Okay, it might be that the only point that connects logically with point 1 is point 7. So it means that in the very first sentence, apart from the topic sentence of my summary, I'm likely to express the first and the 7th point in one complex sentence. Okay, so what that means is it is one thing for you to identify 12 points. It is another thing for you to ensure that the 12 points are logically connected in your summary. And the best way to do that is to connect the point first before you express them in your summary. I also need you to note that your summary must be expressed in your own words. And I'll tell you why. The examiner is interested in knowing to what extent, to what degree you understand the pieces of information you came across in the passage, and which is the purpose of asking you to write the summary. So you must ensure that you use your own vocabulary. Why so? The moment you rely on the words and phrases utilized in the passage, you are simply demonstrating that you do not understand the pieces of information presented in the passage. Because once you can utilize your own words to express information, then you are demonstrating your ability to comprehend and express information. So, in your summary, you must ensure that you use your own words, use your vocabulary. Now, do you have to change all the words and phrases? No. However, you must ensure that the summary reflects your own words. But you are permitted within the context of the IGCSE first language to retain technical words. And technical words are more or less scientific words. They are more or less brand names. So if you've got Toyota, you can't find a synonym for Toyota. You have to maintain it. If you're a Samsung lover and then you find Samsung as a brand mentioned in the text, you can't change Samsung to any other thing. You must maintain it. How about botanical names, scientific terms? You must retain them. So those are technical words and phrases that you are permitted to retain in your summary. However, the entirety of it, apart from the technical words, must be in your own vocabulary. Now, should you write a conclusion? No. Don't include a concluding paragraph. Remember, a summary is straight to the point. Okay, so you are advised to wrap up your summary with the last point and with the last complex sentence you have chosen. Okay, it's also important for you to note that a summary is expressed in one paragraph because the goal is brevity. Okay, so you must ensure that your summary is not developed in more than one paragraph. Now, there's a trick. Summary questions sometimes can have more than one point of focus. So if you cast your mind back to the question I said a couple of minutes ago, you would realize that my question is double barrel. I said, summarize the advantages and the disadvantages of swimming at night. Now, some students are likely to be entrapped. And by entrapment, I mean some students are likely to focus only on the advantages, oftentimes the points that can be easily, identified. Don't fall into that trap. Always ensure that you identify the different points of focus. You might be lucky to come across a one-point focused summary question, meaning the question might simply ask you to summarize the advantages of swimming at night. But sometimes the summary question might insist on 2 points of focus. At other times, the summary question might express 3 points of focus. What are the advantages, disadvantages, as well as probably challenges that swimmers have at night? Something like that. Okay, so it's your responsibility to ensure that you identify all the points of focus that the summary task has, and to ensure that the summary gives equal attention to all the points of focus. I hope you remember everything I've spoken about, and I hope to see you do well in the summary writing. All right, so 15 marks. Bye.